The Scott Jennings Show is proudly sponsored by Lear Capital. Since 1997, Lear has helped Americans protect their retirement accounts and savings with physical gold and silver. With thousands of five-star reviews and $3 billion in transactions, Lear is who I trust to help me buy gold and silver. Visit LearScott.com.
The voice of free speech. The truth delivered. Common sense for the American people. Welcome to the Scott Jennings Show.
Well, we have a packed show today. What is the latest on our economy and the data? Well, Anthony Esposito tells us at 33 minutes past the hour today. Sarah Isgur Flores stops in from SCOTUS blog to talk about this mail-in ballot case that's up before the Supreme Court. Could have November implications. ICE agents appear to have made some progress in reducing wait times in a few airports. And Markwayne Mullin heads to DHS while the governor of Oklahoma names his replacement to the U.S. Senate. It is Tuesday, March 24th. This is Common Sense for the American people. I'm Scott Jennings, broadcasting today for Salem, and we are live from your nation's capital. Topping the news today, Oklahoma has a new senator. His name is Alan Armstrong. He has extensive experience in the energy sector, and he will serve until November when Oklahoma elects a new senator. The governor there, Kevin Stitt, made the announcement just a little while ago. Now, this vacancy was caused by the confirmation of Markwayne Mullin to be the new Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. He was approved last night by the Senate in a vote of 54 to 45, a bipartisan vote. So Markwayne heads to DHS, Armstrong heads to the Senate. Speaking of, several Republican senators went over to the White House last night to see the president about a possible deal to end the Democratic shutdown of Homeland Security. Now, I'm told by a source who was there that the contours of a plan are in place. First part of the plan, fund everything at DHS except the ICE operations. That's about everybody except for 6,000 people. So 254,000 employees get funded, 6,000 would be left out. Now, you have to remember, ICE is funded because of the big, beautiful bill last summer. They've got their money already. So this part of the plan might even attract some Democratic votes, and I am told the president supports it. Now, the second part of the plan, it would be to then move immediately to a budget reconciliation process where you could then fund ICE further and also attach the Save America Act and pass it with just simple majorities in both chambers. We'll see how it shakes out, but that's where I think things are standing at this hour. Of course, this entire DHS shutdown is because Democrats are throwing a tantrum over deporting illegal aliens. And in the process, they injected misery into American airports, causing long lines, huge delays, and lots of missed flights for average American travelers. President Trump deployed ICE agents to several airports yesterday, and it appears to have, in at least a few places, made a positive difference, with wait times reduced as crowd management strategies worked. No negative incidents out there, despite Democratic predictions to the contrary. Here's how the local news called it at the Philly airport in cut number 18.
Once again, ICE agents have arrived here in Philadelphia, but I do want to point out this is an empty line right now. We are standing in the middle where travelers come to check in for TSA. Yesterday, this was all the way back to the garage. So good news today, lines aren't too bad.
Over in Atlanta, there appears to be some measurable and positive impact. CNN this morning with the latest there at Hartsfield-Jackson in cut 17.
Well, there may be a celebration here at the airport before it's all said and done, especially for the folks who've been working nonstop, extra shifts. If you look right here, you can see this is the main checkpoint. Almost no lines, no waiting, Sarah, and it's unbelievable at this point.
Turns out you can just do things like send ICE agents to the airport and help clean up this Democratic mess. But back to the heart of the matter. If you let these Democrats talk long enough about all of these issues, they will tell you exactly what they are doing and who they care about the most. Let's listen to Chris Murphy, senator from Connecticut, in a mostly forgotten clip from an interview he did on MSNBC back in 2024. Here's cut number 3.
The negotiation didn't have a path to citizenship. It was entirely on their terms in order to get Ukraine funding, right?
Well, I mean, Chris, that's been a failed play for 20 years. So you are right that that has been the Democratic strategy for 30 years, maybe. And it has failed to deliver for the people we care about most, the undocumented Americans that are in this country.
Did you catch that? And I'm going to play it again. That's Chris Murphy. Now, he is a clown. He's also a senator from Connecticut. But he says the quiet part out loud. Democrats care more about illegal aliens, which he called undocumented Americans, than anyone or anything else. Here it is again, cut number 3.
The negotiation didn't have a path to citizenship. It was entirely on their terms in order to get Ukraine funding, right?
Well, I mean, Chris, that's been a failed play for 20 years. So you are right that that has been the Democratic strategy for 30 years, maybe. And it has failed to deliver for the people we care about most, the undocumented Americans that are in this country.
And since Murphy said that, well, the Democrats have proved him right. They have resisted all efforts to deport illegal aliens, even violent offenders. They will do anything for illegal aliens, to get them here, to keep them here, to coddle them when they break our laws, and to excuse them when they murder our citizens. Just listen to this Chicago alderman, Maria Haddon, who blames Sheridan Gorman for her own murder. You know Sheridan, the 18-year-old college student who was murdered by the Venezuelan illegal immigrant this weekend. We brought you her tragic story yesterday. This Democratic politician in Chicago is blaming this poor girl, this poor murder victim, for her own death. Cut number 7.
All the time, right? And they go out on the pier, they walk around. So the kids were out doing normal things people do in the neighborhood. And it sounds like this might have been a wrong place, wrong time, running into a person who had a gun. They might have startled this person at the end of the pier unintentionally. But that's...
That is an elected official in Chicago who says the murder victim, Sheridan Gorman, was in the wrong place at the wrong time. What about the illegal alien from Venezuela? Was Mr. Medina in the wrong place at the wrong time? Common sense would tell you that yes, in fact, he was. But the Democratic Party, folks, well, they believe an American murder victim was in the wrong place, that she shouldn't have taken a walk with her friends in her own country. How many more times do we need to see Democrats tell us who they are? It's a political party that is being operated for the express purpose of importing and retaining as many illegal aliens, violent and otherwise, as possible. Seems that every day we're confronted with new evidence that the open border policies of the Democratic Party have allowed in extremely violent people who were hell-bent on terrorizing American cities and American citizens. Last week in Utah, in fact, federal authorities have confirmed that an illegal alien from Mexico attempted to murder a woman by slashing her throat and leaving her to die. Investigators have identified the suspect as 30-year-old Jesus Alejandro Ramirez Padilla. He told the police that he had, quote, been having thoughts of killing someone, and today he decided that he was going to kill the woman. I'll continue on with the story. Jesus said he strangled the woman from behind while they were both standing until she became unconscious and fell to the ground. Once on the ground, Jesus placed his hands around her neck and continued choking her. Jesus said he wanted to take the woman out of her misery and then used a blade to cut her throat 2 or 3 times. Jesus told detectives he intended to kill the woman, and he told detectives that his state of mind was altered from ingesting drugs. This is all in the arrest affidavit. The victim survived somehow. She's in critical but stable condition. Ramirez Padilla was charged with attempted murder, obstruction of justice, aggravated assault, and use or possession of drug paraphernalia, and is currently being held at the Salt Lake City jail. Federal officials are begging local officials there not to release him back into the streets, but of course, it's ridiculous that they even have to ask. Because Democrats in cities across America, well, they release violent illegals back onto the streets, your streets, every day. That's what happened in Chicago, where Miss Gorman was murdered by a Venezuelan national, arrested for shoplifting a while back, never showed up for court, released back onto the streets, and he wound up killing a young woman, an American citizen, who had her entire life ahead of her. Democrats care more about illegal aliens than they will ever care about you, even if it means a few of you are murdered along the way. It's Scott Jennings broadcasting on Salem, common sense for the American people. Let me talk to you about Relief Factor. Since discovering this last summer, the Jennings household is quite pleased with it, but I also need to tell you they have improved their formula. We're looking forward to that. They've added a premium black pepper extract, makes the formula work better inside your body. If you have aches and pains and you're looking for the moment to finally do something about it, I would humbly ask you to go to relieffactor.com or call 1-800-4RELIEF and sign up for the 3-week quick start plan. $19.95. You have nothing to lose at all. Relief Factor. Get yourself out of the aches and pains. We did it in the Jennings household, and we think that you should too. More to come on the Scott Jennings Show right after this on Salem. Stay with us.
Hi, this is Scott Jennings for my friends at BestHotGrill.com, your source for staying warm and eating well when the temperature drops. When it's cold outside or the power goes out, you can turn your wood-burning fireplace into a reliable source of emergency heat with Rasmussen Chill Buster vent-free gas logs and Alterna vent-free fireballs. They require no electricity, just natural gas or propane, and it helps keep your family warm when you need it most. And winter cold doesn't mean the grilling has to stop. With a Solaire infrared gas grill, you can grill year-round. Solaire infrared burners heat up in just 3 minutes, perform just as well in winter as they do in summer, and they cook food faster while locking in incredible juiciness and flavor. So stay warm, stay fed, and stay prepared. Visit BestHotGrill.com to complete the personalized log sizing form, or order a Solaire demo rental grill so you can try before you buy. That's BestHotGrill.com, BestHotGrill.com.
He's the author of the best-selling book, A Revolution of Common Sense. Here's Scott Jennings.
Laken Riley 2.0. That's the headline today from my good friend Curtis Houck over at the Media Research Center and Newsbusters. We're talking, of course, about the tragic murder of Sheridan Gorman in Chicago by an illegal alien from Venezuela. Curtis Houck joins us now to discuss this news. Curtis, good to have you back on the show here. My first question, and I hesitate to ask because I'm not sure I want to know the answer, but I think I already know the answer, is how is the mainstream news media handling this terrible situation in Chicago so far?
Well, Scott, this is an example of why we need shows like yours and conservative media to exist, because without it, the American people would have no idea that this kind of thing is going on. NBC News, only 23 seconds on the murder since it was found out that the suspect in the case is an illegal immigrant stricken with tuberculosis and thus not able to appear at his initial court date. ABC, one single segment, less than a minute and a half, just over a minute 10. CBS is the only one to have cracked even 2 minutes. So you add all those things up, it's still well below 5 minutes. It's an embarrassing display by the media here, and they've shown time and time again, whether it's Rachel Morin, Jocelyn Nungery, or some of the more recent incidents with illegal immigrants behind the wheel of semi-trucks that Secretary Duffy is trying to address. The American media are not serving the American people. And instead, when they do talk about illegal immigrants, of course, it's the case of people like the Maryland man, whom they'll side with.
Well, I did see, Curtis, a headline, I think it was in the Chicago newspaper. Their initial tweet on it referred to him, I don't know if it was Chicago man or they used one of the suburbs of Chicago, but they definitely went out of their way to try to make it seem like this person was not an illegal alien. Let's talk about the Democratic officials in Chicago, Illinois. The governor there, J.B. Pritzker, has put out a very muted condolence tweet that doesn't address the issue at hand. What's going on with J.B. Pritzker? Now, he's running for president. Is it your opinion that he's not really able to dive into this story because it would hurt him with the radical Democrats who will vote in the 2028 primary?
Scott, the irony in all of this is J.B. Pritzker did a video a few months ago walking along either the same pier or one nearby, mocking this notion that illegal immigrants are causing crime in our streets and harming American citizens. So, you know, you would think that now that he's caught, he would own up to it. But as you point out, he's running for re-election, running for president. He's also bankrolling numerous other Democrat officials, either himself or through his various other super PACs. So he has an agenda to push, and it's obviously not on the side of the American people. It's on the side of illegal immigrants, their base of voters.
Now, it seems to me that there may be one sane Democrat left, at least currently serving in elected office, and that is John Fetterman, the senator from Pennsylvania. He put out a much more passionate response where he talked about being the Democratic lead on the Laken-Riley Act. How is it that we have an entire political party and only one elected Democrat can do the right thing when an 18-year-old American citizen is horrifically, tragically murdered by a Venezuelan illegal immigrant? One Democrat out of an entire political party, and it's Fetterman, who lives in a different state.
This shows the state of the American left, Scott. You know, you would think that a story like this, a young, beautiful college student murdered in cold blood, is the kind of thing of a Lifetime movie or the grocery store tabloids. It's the kind of thing that the news media would normally be interested in. But obviously, because of the facts of the case, allegedly, they're not going to cover it. They're not going to acknowledge it. And as you point out about the local media and the local politicians, this goes beyond simply left and right. This is simply right versus wrong. And in the case of the media, basic journalism is being violated by not including parts of the who, what, where, when, why, and how. It's basic, you know, English comprehension that we learn not even in college or high school, in middle school, that they are purposefully leaving out because they have an agenda to push. And someone like Fetterman, if the Democratic Party were saying and the left were saying, he'd be all over the place. And instead, they're looking to primary him back in my home state.
Yeah, it's a crazy situation because we're debating nationally right now immigration issues. It's why the Department of Homeland Security is closed. It's why there's long lines at the airports. And here you have a violent murder caused by illegal immigration policies that are preferred by one party. You'd think this would be a good entree point to sort of personalize a national policy debate. But no, the narrative, Curtis, as you point out, is all that matters to the Democrats and all that matters to the national media. Curtis Houck is over at the Media Research Center, Newsbusters. You watch more cable TV than anybody. My hat's off to you, but buddy, I hope you're taking frequent vacations because it'd rot anybody's brain. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're talking the economy with Anthony Esposito. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. Stay with us.
Gold and silver recently soared to record highs and then pulled back. So are precious metals still a good buy? Many Wall Street experts predict higher prices ahead. Why? Well, because we still have trillions in national debt, a declining dollar, and inflation that keeps shrinking our savings. Even with corrections along the way, gold remains a historical hedge for wealth protection. That's why Morgan Stanley's chief investment officer ditched the 60-40 stocks and bonds portfolio and is recommending up to 20% in precious metals. They're getting educated, and you should too. Call Lear Capital at 1-800-880-2424 for your free gold investment kit and learn how you could qualify for up to $20,000 in bonus gold. Lear Capital has over $3 billion in transactions and thousands of five-star reviews. Call 1-800-880-2424, 1-800-880-2424, or visit learscott.com.
You've heard the narratives. Now get the truth. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
It is Tuesday, March 24th. In just a moment, we're going to chat with our economic guru here at the show, Anthony Esposito. Before we get to him, though, I just wanted to take a moment. Something happened on CNN last night. I was on the 10 o'clock debating show, normally hosted by Abby Phillip. Last night, expertly hosted, I might add, by Casey Hunt. Did a terrific job filling in. And they had this character on there, Miles Taylor. Now, you remember Miles. He is the low-level staffer from the first Trump administration who wrote the anonymous op-ed in the New York Times saying he was going to try to subvert the will of the commander-in-chief, who's, by the way, is elected. These low-level staffers are not. At any rate, you remember this whole saga with Miles Taylor. Well, he bounces around in D.C. and pops up on these shows from time to time. Last night, he made a passionate argument for why Obama was so much better on Iran than Trump is right now. I want to play this exchange for you in Cut 19.
All three of us ragged on the Obama administration for giving cash to the Iranian regime to reach a nuclear deal. I think it was $400 million in pallets. What Donald Trump just did on lifting sanctions on Iranian oil
that's already at sea
is 10 times as much money. First off, likely to the Iranian regime, 10 times as much money. He's giving cash to our enemies while Obama.
Now, do you think that the Ayatollah prefers his life under Obama or under Trump?
Look, probably Obama, yes? The Ayatollah's dead.
There you go. You heard it here first. I think the real
See, oftentimes the job that I have on CNN is just to ask the simple questions. Who do you think the Ayatollah prefers? Obama and the pallets of cash, or Trump and the 10 bajillion pounds of bombs we have dropped on that country, which, oh, by the way, killed the supreme leader in Iran? I'll let you do the math on that. All right, joining us now on the show, the CEO of Ascalon 6 Capital. He is an expert on markets and economy data. I want you to welcome in Anthony Esposito. He has a podcast, by the way, which you should listen to. It's called Policy and Profits. He does that with EJ and Tony. Anthony, welcome into the Scott Jennings Show. You've been on, I think, once before, and we met actually on a CNN panel, a little bit like that one. But you are tracking this stuff. You're trading. You're in the middle of all the finances. And I just, we haven't had a big economic conversation on the show in a while, so I'm inviting you on. I kind of want your vibe check. We get a lot of data. You hear a lot of things. You get a lot of punditry. But I wanted somebody who works in it. Where do we stand? In your opinion, first question, what is the health of the U.S. economy as we sit here in March 2026?
Well, Scott, thanks so much for having me again. It's great to see you again. The health of the economy is actually slowing. We had a very slow start to 2025 as far as GDP, and then we gradually picked up. We had a really great Q3 on an annualized basis, over 4% growth. That's kind of pared down a little bit to what looks like will be the Q4 number of about 1.4%. So President Trump has done a great job of not only privatizing the economy and reducing government jobs and government spending, which is the taxpayer dollar and printed money. So that's obviously anti-inflationary, pro-growth. He's done a great job of bringing in private investment through the trade and tariff conversations, all of which has done a few things. So it's increased the real take-home wages. We've seen those go up about 1.5%, which is nothing short of amazing. We've seen government jobs down at a 10-year low. We've seen an increase in construction jobs across the board, private jobs across the board, and jobs that have gone to native-born Americans. We had a massive year. Over 1 million jobs went to native-born Americans, which was a net negative under President Biden, which a lot of people don't realize. So we definitely have some momentum. The big, beautiful bill, again, adding some tailwind and momentum to the economy. But we have seen what I see as a slowing going into Q4 GDP. Payrolls looked good. They were strong. We got a pretty sour February report as far as non-farm payrolls. So we're keeping an eye on that. And now we have the conflict in Iran, which whatever your view is, mine personally is that it was a necessary event. But that's going to be a real question mark moving forward as far as inflation and economic growth. So long story short, we have an economy that's moving in the right direction. President Trump's agenda has been nothing short of amazing on many fronts, but we're facing some hurdles now as we head into the end or middle of 2026.
So as a layperson, you're an economist, you're in the financial markets, I'm not. Here are the things that I hear, just as a conservative who tends to vote for Republicans and their policies. Here's what I hear that I like. Government is shrinking. I think we have actually the smallest federal workforce since 1966. I mean, every Republican I've ever worked for said they were going to shrink the government. Trump finally did it. That's number one. Number two, you mentioned this. I like it that the job growth is actually in the private sector. I think under Biden, you had two things going on. A lot of the job growth was actually in government. So government jobs were growing, and then whatever private sector job growth you had, a lot of those jobs were not going to American citizens. Now, jobs in government are coming down, private sector going up, and the private sector jobs are going to actual American citizens. I like that. The things that worry me, truthfully, there's been some uneven GDP numbers, as you mentioned, and I still am not quite sure what to make of how Iran and the war is going to shake out long term. We've seen the fluctuation in the energy markets and gas prices. My assumption is if it ends somewhat quickly, you'll see that settle back into normal. So there's things that I like, and then you mentioned that we got a little bit of softness on the growth side. In your opinion, what's going right today, and then sort of what worries you for the next 3 to 6 months?
Yeah, I think you nailed a lot of what's going right. So I'll add to the list of the Biden smokescreen that not only were jobs government funded or direct government jobs, a lot of the GDP growth was either transfer payments from the government or government spending. So it wasn't true private GDP growth. It wasn't true consumption and net exports forget as far as a positive input, which they are now as we decrease our trade deficit under President Trump. I think what we see as positives right now is we continue to see a privatization of the economy. We continue to see the opportunity for native-born Americans to get work. And we see a real push to get, and I'm going to go off a little bit, but we see a continued push to get rates lower. Now, that's a bit of a struggle. I think as the new Fed chairman comes in, Warsh, he will not only cut rates, which is really not the most important thing he can do, in my opinion, but he can draw liquidity out of the system. That may not be what the markets want, but that will help rates come down and help make life a little more affordable for the U.S. citizen. So we're moving in the right direction across the board. And don't forget the inflationary question. Why do we have inflation? Well, we have inflation because of the massive government debt and spending that we produce in the United States. I mean, we have $39 trillion in debt. That in and of itself is the root cause of inflation. You have price shocks, you have different variations and fluctuations in pricing, but overall inflation has been what it is. I mean, spiked up to 12% under President Biden because of debt and deficit spending. If we look at the war in Iran and how this kind of moves, how we move out, right? The markets right now and everyday Americans at the kitchen table are worried about in market terms, whether these are price shocks that are going to settle back down or whether the damage is a structural damage, meaning this is going to take quarters upon years to recover and get things back to normal. So right now we have crude oil at 100. We're in the 90s now, 92 a barrel for front month WTI crude. That was down at 60. That was as high as 120. How does that flow through to the pump, and how sticky is that, right? What other prices are increased, and where are we seeing inflation or economic pressures to the upside because of the war? Is it food? Is it fertilizers? Is it semiconductor chips? Is it all of these things are kind of working through? Is this a structural change because of the war and how long it will last and what the damage has been, or are these short-term price shocks that will kind of fade and we'll get back to normal? I think we probably will land somewhere in the middle. It depends on how long we're there. And already we've seen structural damage, facility damage in the Middle East that's going to take months, quarters, years to fix. What I do know is that we as a nation have been positioned in we're in a position of strength right now, not only because we are energy independent, but because the economy was on the upswing. So I think we will weather the storm fairly well. But there is a question of how much damage is being done and how long will it take for that damage to reset.
Anthony Esposito is our guest. He is the CEO of Ascalon 6 Capital and host of the podcast Policy and Profits. Let's talk about the financial markets a little bit. President Trump back in February, I guess it was February 9th, 10th, somewhere in there, we hit Dow 50,000. He was very proud of that. Since that time, the stock market has come down quite a bit. I think we're sitting at about 46,000 right now today. So some of that is related to the war. Some of it might have predated the war announcement just a little bit. What's your financial market outlook for the rest of the year? I know you can't predict the end of a military conflict, but do you expect the Dow to creep back towards 50,000? What about the rest of the financial indices?
So I probably will not have the Main Street view, but I'll give you our view here at Ascalon 6. We run a technical rule-based strategy. We had been calling for a sell-off in equities back in December. So the war right now is just another headline. It's not really, it's in the mix, but it's not really the catalyst of all catalysts. We predicted back then, based on our model and our work, that we were hitting a spot where momentum and trend were breaking down in all three of the timelines that we look at for the S&P 500 and the Russell 2000, which are our main equity products here. I think as we move through the process, we fully expect the S&P to go down at a minimum 10 to 15%. That would put the S&P, the cash index, at about 6,300, coming down from about 7,000. So we see more downside to the markets here, and there's a ton of reasons why to roll through. As I said, momentum trend have broken down. We were at the end of a cycle, in our opinion. Markets were at all-time highs. Valuations were at all-time highs. If you look at the cyclically adjusted price-to-earnings ratios, we had very, very extended margin levels. We had very low cash levels. We had an over-exuberance on the retail side, and we had an institutional base that was actually pulling back and stepping away from the market. So a lot of things there to digest. Oftentimes you have a spark, and as I say, the headlines are interchangeable. The spark for this breakdown below support, and what I saw as a topping pattern for the S&P in particular, was the war in Iran and the announcement. But we had been breaking down and testing that support for at least 3 to 4 weeks before that happened. So we see more downside to the markets. It's nothing that's any different than any other cycle, and it shouldn't be a shock to anyone. I do see the Dow in particular could potentially test 35,000 to 40,000 before we recover. I do, as I said, at a minimum, I see the S&P at 6,300 on the cash, potentially down to 6,000, and then see how it's acting at those levels. But I am relatively bearish on the market here, and we have been, setting up for that since December. So that's kind of our stance right now. And then as we move through the war, and again, what structural damage is being done, that's going to kind of wake people up and create more supply.
Anthony Esposito, thanks for joining us. He's the CEO of Ascalon 6 Capital and host of the podcast called Policy and Profits. Anthony, a little bit of a wet blanket today, but we'll allow it, and we'll have you back in the near future. Got to get a word in for our friends at Patriot Mobile. If you want a cell phone company, a wireless provider that actually believes in the stuff that you believe in and they put their money where their mouth is, the answer is Patriot Mobile. There's never been a better time to switch. Go to patriotmobile.com/Scott or call 972-PATRIOT. Use the promo code Scott. Get a free month. patriotmobile.com/Scott, 972-PATRIOT. Keep your number, keep your phone, get a new phone. I don't care. I just want you to get with a company that cares about what you care about. When we come back, we'll talk nuclear energy. It's the Scott Jennings Show on Salem. Stay with us.
He's not in the Oval Office or owning the libs on CNN. He's here with us. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
It is Tuesday, March 24th. By the way, I mean what I say when it comes to this Patriot Mobile business. I know these guys. They're down in Texas. I met them, talked to them, used their service. It really actually does matter who you do business with. And I'm just telling you, you want to do business with Patriot Mobile. You want to do business with these guys, you're going to get the same or even better service than you would get by going to one of the big companies. But it's just, you write your check every month, you pay your bill every month. Do you want it to go to a corporation that doesn't care what you think, or do you want it to go to a corporation that might actually invest that in the causes that you care about? It's an easy call for me. Ought to be an easy call for everybody. Patriot Mobile. They're our buddies of the Scott Jennings Show. Hope you do business with them. Our next guest, by the way, is a policy pro, and he has an interesting piece out in the National Review about nuclear energy. Something incredible has happened. For the first time in its history, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has issued a construction permit for a private advanced nuclear reactor. Our guest is Andrew Follett. Find him on the X platform at Andrew C. Follett. Andrew, thanks for being here. I was reading this. I read that sentence like 5 times. The first time we've ever had a construction permit for a private advanced nuclear reactor. How big a deal is this? Thanks for telling us about it.
Well, this is an absolutely huge deal. This is an entirely new type of nuclear power with a lot of inherent advantages, a lot of inherent safety advantages, much faster to build, and just better all around. This is not the first U.S. advanced nuclear reactor. We had a very active one in the 1990s, and it worked great. But Democrats of the day, including Al Gore, Bill Clinton, and John Kerry, absolutely terminated the program, citing alleged cost concerns. But before it was terminated, it actually worked really, really well. And it worked so incredibly well that Clinton's science advisor said, yeah, I have to kill it, but it's a symbol. It has to go. He didn't want it. Nobody wanted it. It worked great, but they needed the problem as opposed to the solution.
Okay, so explain to me something. I've always been confused about this. Democrats claim they're for clean energy. Nuclear is clean energy. Yet you do have Democrats, obviously, from your reporting, and as is obvious, in the United States and, frankly, around the world, who are constantly trying to kill nuclear power as a long-term viable energy source for us. Why is that? What is the disconnect? You say you want clean energy, but not this kind of clean energy? It's never made any sense to me.
Well, they're locked into a 1970s paradigm. There was actually an old James Bond movie from 1974 in which solar power is the future. And, you know, we're over 50 years in the past, 50 years past that point, and it still isn't there. It's like 2 or 3% of U.S. electricity, not even U.S. energy, which is, you know, stuff like gasoline. So they are locked in this very obsolete framework, and it mostly has to do with money. So they oppose these new, innovative types of reactors and everything new and innovative. They're addicted to this medieval level, like the sun and the wind are medieval level power. That's how people got energy in the 14th century. It's not the new stuff.
So let me ask you a question about, dare I say, government working properly. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, it says, completed their safety review 11 months ahead of schedule. Does this surprise you that a government bureaucracy did something ahead of when it was supposed to?
It was also under budget, too. And that's, for anyone who knows anything about the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, that is astounding. Historically, they are absolutely awful at doing anything on time. And this is an entirely new type of reactor, and they were trying to use the obsolete framework for the old type of reactors. And they did something new. It's really astounding just how much we've made nuclear energy great again.
All right, Andrew, I got 20 seconds. Final question. A lot of people have concerns about these AI data centers that we need to build and all the energy they will take. Is nuclear the answer to this? We build some of these advanced nuclear reactors. We solve our issues when it comes to providing energy to AI data centers?
Absolutely. Nuclear provides clean baseload power of the type that data centers and, quite frankly, everything needs. In contrast, things like solar and wind, you can't store the power, so it's not that useful.
All right, that is Andrew Follett. He has got an amazing piece in the National Review about nuclear energy. We're actually going to build an advanced nuclear reactor in the United States for the first time, and it's going to be a good thing. And we've got a lot of big things happening in our energy needs, and this is part of the answer. Andrew, thanks for coming on. We're going to take a break. We'll have more right after this on The Scott Jennings Show. It is Tuesday, March 24th. Common sense for the American people here. Hour number 2 underway. Let's give you a quick check of the headlines. In fact, it does sound like there is some back and forth going on between the United States and the Iranian government. Or what's left of it. Now, even the Iranians are confirming it. CNN reporting that yes, President Trump was in fact telling the truth about negotiations that are going on. He has paused bombing against energy infrastructure in the Iranian country there for the next 5 days in the hopes that maybe we're going to find a solution to this. We'll see what happens over the next couple of days, but CNN confirming that there is back and forth going on between the Iranians and the Americans. There is some improvement today at many American airports thanks to ICE being deployed to assist the understaffed TSA agents who are coming to work Atlanta and Philly and a few other places seem much better today. Houston, it sounds like, remains a sore spot. But the ICE presence appears to have been a net positive, and there have been no negative incidents reported. It sounds like there may be a deal forming up to get DHS funded and to get the TSA agents paid and to get the airports back to normal, hopefully. Joining me to discuss this and more, Senator John Cornyn of the great state of Texas is here. Senator, President Trump met with a few of your colleagues last night at the White House. Sounds like there is a deal brewing that he will support to get DHS funded first and then to get ICE funded and the Save America Act passed and a reconciliation bill second. So it's a two-part plan. Sounds like it might work. What are you hearing? Give us your perspective.
Well, that's what I'm hearing too, Scott. And, the irony of all this is President Trump and Senate Republicans and the House members were one step ahead of Democrats because we actually pre-funded ICE for many years, several years at least, in the one big beautiful bill, the working family tax cuts. And so nothing they were doing in terms of holding the TSA agents hostage and the rest of DHS was going to change one bit how ICE was performing its job. And so this is all political theater and just a stunt. Unfortunately, it created a lot of hardships for some patriotic TSA agents and created a huge inconvenience for the American people. So I think we're going to get to a good place. And of course, the Save America Act is the president's top priority. We're going to continue to work on that while we work toward potentially putting this in a reconciliation bill that we can pass just with Republican votes.
You know, these ICE agents that went to the airports, there were a number of Democrats in the House and the Senate who went on television and said some extremely irresponsible things, like, oh, these ICE agents are going to come in and start shooting people who are in line and harassing passengers. We've been at this now for a day and a half. We've seen no negative incidents between ICE and people who are going through these airport lines. Do you just have to sit back sometimes and marvel at the willingness of your Democratic colleagues to go on television with these unhinged rants? I mean, you might scare somebody to death thinking they're going to go to the airport and get shot. The reality is they might go to the airport and have a much faster line than they would have otherwise.
Yeah, you're probably more used to this than most people, having to deal with some of the liberal commentators on network and broadcast media. But this is just completely irresponsible, as you pointed out. Nothing of the sort is going to happen, nor did happen. Actually, it provided an extra few sets of hands and feet to try to expedite people's movement through the airport, while the Democrats were holding the rest of TSA and the American people, flying public, hostage for this ill-considered and shameful shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security.
Let's talk about the procedural issues here. So, number one, you'll get DHS funded except for ICE. But as you pointed out, that's okay because the Republicans and the president had the forethought last summer to go ahead and fund ICE for the next several years. So that's okay. You get the TSA guys paid. You get the Coast Guard. You get FEMA. You get everything else moving again. And then part two of the plan puts you in a reconciliation process, which I think is interesting for the Save America Act, because right now you probably don't have 60 votes to do Save America outside of that, but you might have 51, which is all you need in reconciliation. So my question is this the outcome that conservatives should prefer? And is this going to be a problem with the Senate parliamentarian? You know, that always, in these reconciliation bills, that's always an issue. What's your perspective on that?
Well, we've got all the budget nerds working on this, and they can become very creative in coming up with solutions how to bypass the parliamentarian. As you know, the budget is supposed to deal with just that, just money, not policy. But there are various ways, various levers and incentives and disincentives we can put into the budget that will help move this policy down the road in a dramatic fashion. I think this will give us essentially 95% of what we were after in the first place. But as you point out, without 60 votes and with the other issues that we're dealing with, I think this is a pretty good outcome.
Let's talk about your colleague, or I guess I should say your former colleague, Markwayne Mullin of Oklahoma. He was confirmed last night to be the new Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. You've been serving with Senator Mullin, now Secretary Mullin. Do you have confidence that he's going to lead the Department of Homeland Security in a way that we can all be proud? And we've got a new senator coming in from Oklahoma, announced by the governor there this morning. I'm not sure if you know who this person is, but interested in your comments on that.
Yeah, we're looking forward to swearing in the new senator in just a short period of time here. The business executive, retired from business, but wants to come in and help us with permitting reform, which is certainly one of the most important issues that we have to deal with. Markwayne Mullin is an Oklahoma classic. He's a unique individual, former MMA fighter, former plumber who built a business into a multi-million-dollar business. So obviously he knows how to run a large organization. But the Department of Homeland Security is going to be a challenge for whoever is in that position. But perhaps the most important quality he has is his close relationship with President Trump. And that's going to be critical in dealing with all the challenges that the department has and will have, particularly in light of this reflexive obstruction by the Democrats to anything and everything the president wants to do to enforce our immigration laws.
Senator, you're involved in a runoff for the Senate in Texas. The runoff comes up in May. Your opponent is Ken Paxton. The Democrat is a guy named Tallarico. We've been playing a lot of his comments on the show here, and it dawns on me that the Democrats have nominated someone who couldn't be less Texan than James Tallarico, whether it comes up on the meat, like I'm going to get rid of all the meat to solve climate change. We have 6 genders. God wanted Mary to get an abortion. I mean, one thing after another. Are you stunned at the direction of the Democratic Party in your home state for nominating someone with views that can only be charitably described as somewhat out of the mainstream?
Yeah, they're non-Texan views. And I think, it's a reflection of where the Democratic Party is these days. This is not your mother's or father's or grandparents' Democratic Party. These are extreme people with radical views, and Tallarico perfectly reflects that. My only concern is, Scott, that if we nominate somebody with the incredible baggage that Ken Paxton has, that he may not win the Republican nominee if it's Paxton against this person that should be easily defeated. And also we need to worry about the down ballot, where the President Trump is depending on the top of the ballot, which will be the Senate race, hopefully me, that will help down ballot, particularly the congressional seats, the 5 new seats that were just recently redrawn, that help keep the majority in the House.
Senator John Cornyn of Texas, thanks for joining us. Let's hope this deal to get DHS and TSA moving comes together, and we will have you on very soon. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Scott.
All right, a word from our friends at Relief Factor. Now, I've been talking
there,
about
what have
Relief
you been
Factor for months. And if you have been listening to me, you know, A, that we like it. B, you know who really likes it? My dad. In the Jennings household, it's my dad. No spring chicken, as I like to say, but he is hopping around like one. He attributes it to Relief Factor. And I had to tell him the other day, Relief Factor has fixed up the formula. They've put this premium black pepper extract in the Relief Factor. It's going to make your body absorb the key ingredients more efficiently. I'm not a scientist, but sounds good to me. in my opinion, that's what you want. You want the formula to work better, and that's what they're doing. Look, if you've got aches and pains, don't take it from me. Take it from all these customers that call us all the time and tell us, Relief Factor, it's working. The 3-week quick start, $19.95. That's it. Go to ReliefFactor.com. Call 1-800-4RELIEF. ReliefFactor.com or 1-800-4RELIEF. Better formula. It's out. It's in the packages now. This stuff works. It's working in the Jennings household, and it could work for you. When we come back, the Supreme Court takes up a key case on mail-in ballots. We have an expert here to discuss after this.
The very definition of never back down. Here's Scott Jennings.
Yesterday was an interesting day at the U.S. Supreme Court. Oral arguments were held in a case that may alter the way states are able to count mail-in ballots in the November election. Joining me to discuss this is Sarah Isgur, the editor of SCOTUS blog, and she's a legal analyst, one of the sharpest minds when it comes to analyzing these cases and analyzing what these justices might be doing. Sarah, making your inaugural appearance here on the Scott Jennings Show. First of all, thank you, and second of all, tell us about the case, what went on at the court, and sort of what are the issues at play here?
This is one of those COVID rule cases. We haven't seen a ton of them recently at the court, but the question here is that the state of Mississippi changed their election code so that while your ballot has to be postmarked by Election Day, it can be received by election officials up to 5 days later. And the Republican Party, as well as some other folks, sued the state of Mississippi to argue that that violates federal law, that in fact, the ballots have to be received by Election Day. That's what Election Day means, because that's the term Congress used in federal law.
Okay, so these are ballots that someone filled out, dropped in a mailbox, postmarked before Election Day. Somehow, maybe they dropped it in like the day before Election Day. Then several days after the election, these ballots are still coming in. Conservatives have raised questions about, these late arriving ballots for a long time. So as these arguments were being made, what did you make of the arguments? What did you make of the reaction from the justices? Do you have any idea which way this may be headed?
Well, there were almost two different arguments going on at the court. One was, what did Congress intend in their federal laws that they have passed? Did they give states the ability to make this choice for themselves? Are states able to say it has to be in by Election Day, but other states can say, as long as it's postmarked by Election Day, you could turn it in a few days later. Is that what Congress meant in the statute where they said there is an Election Day? But there was also another conversation happening in these arguments. Is this a good idea? Does this allow for fraud? Does this have any limiting, reagent really to it? Or could a state say, we accept ballots up to the day that Congress is sworn in, 30 days later, and it doesn't have to be postmarked. Maybe you could just hand it to your uncle and he could swear that he got it before Election Day. And so there was both sort of a policy debate happening and who gets to decide what did Congress say debate happening.
Yeah, in the Republican Party and the conservative end, there's always a lot of talk about whether mail-in ballots, just sort of provide different venues, different ways for there to be fraud or the possibility of fraud. This is another one of those vectors. I assume some of that was brought up in front of the justices. Did you get a sense about where people were leaning? Were the conservative justices sort of lining up together? Were the liberals lining up together? Is there anybody in the matrix here that might surprise us?
Well, I tend to think of the court in a 3-3-3 clump. So you have the three liberal justices, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson. And yes, in this case, they were sort of like, this is up to the states. If they want to experiment with this and have ballots come in 5 days later, Congress allowed them to do that. You then have the three justices, Alito, Thomas, and Gorsuch. They tend to stick together and to, well, in this case, for instance, say, no, this is clearly something. Election Day has a meaning, and it means a single day. There's no late arriving ballots. And then you have the three justices in the middle. They are all likely to be in the majority more than 90% of the time last term. This is the Chief Justice, Kavanaugh, and Barrett. So you really want to look in on what they're asking in arguments like this. They seemed quite skeptical of Mississippi's case that they could receive ballots 5 days later.
Okay, so it sounds like it's possible that we could see a ruling from the court here that would change rules, I guess, in a lot of states. If that were to happen, would that go into effect before this November's midterm election?
They talked about this at the argument, and yes, I think this would go into effect before November. But what the justices were sort of brushing off that concern, because it doesn't really affect voters. As long as you know what the deadline is, you simply need to get your mail-in ballot in 4 days ahead of the election instead of on Election Day. There's another fascinating piece of this case. This is Mississippi, a deep red state, arguing for this against the Republican Party of Mississippi and the Solicitor General, Trump Solicitor General of the United States. So this really was not a partisan argument in any traditional sense.
All right, that voice you're hearing, Sarah Isgur Flores. She is the editor of SCOTUS blog. I read it. I'm not a lawyer, so I have to rely on you to tell me what in the world is going on. And now you've signed up to be the official SCOTUS correspondent of the Scott Jennings Show. So congrats on your new job title. In addition to running SCOTUS blog, we'll follow this case along with many others, and we look forward to seeing you in the very near future. Thanks for your time today.
Love it. Thanks, Scott.
All right, we'll have more on the Scott Jennings Show when we come back. It's Common Sense for the American People on Salem. Stay with us.
Straight talk without the bluster. When you positively need the truth, this is where you come. The Scott Jennings Show.
It is Tuesday, March 24th. Common Sense for the American People. Scott Jennings is here on Salem. Thanks for joining us today. Wanted to have a conversation with someone that I met for the first time the other night. And we had a great conversation at an event in New York City, and I thought this is something that we honestly need to talk about on the air. It's about anti-Semitism. It is on the rise across the globe. We see it filtering through our politics. We see it filtering through a lot of our media, filtering through a lot of our cultural institutions, our entertainment institutions. And we all have a responsibility, in my opinion, to stop it in its tracks. It is evil. It wrecks people. It wrecks families. It wrecks institutions. It wrecks societies. We've seen in our world history the terrible wages of anti-Semitism. The Trump administration has a strategy and people to do something about this, and that is my conversation today. I'm bringing on Ambassador Rabbi Yehuda Kaploun. He was confirmed by the United States Senate on December 18th of last year as the Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism. So this exists inside the Trump State Department. As Special Envoy, he serves as primary advisor to the United States on global anti-Semitism issues. After October the 7th, Rabbi Kaploun met and assisted with numerous hostage families who were affected by that terrible attack, and he hosted the first memorial for the attack in Doral, Florida, which was attended by President Trump. Ambassador Kaploun, thank you so much for your time today. I know you have a busy schedule in Washington, D.C. today, but I was so happy that we ran into each other in New York the other night, and I'm grateful for your time on this radio show because, broadly speaking, I think you and I would both agree anti-Semitism is rearing up in a lot of different venues, but President Trump is a friend of the Jewish people, and he's a friend of Israel, and he has people like you and strategies in place to combat anti-Semitism. Tell us a little bit about that inside the Trump administration.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me, Scott. I would venture to say that this president has made it very clear, as he has from day one of his administration, that anti-Semitism is not going to be tolerated by his administration in any shape, way, or form. And to do that, he's issued numerous executive orders, including one that says anti-Semitism will not be tolerated, and directing every agency within the government to work to combat anti-Semitism. And you can see certain results, even one that happened today because of the president's efforts in combating anti-Semitism globally, is that in meetings with Ambassador Bill White and myself at the direction of the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, an incredible individual in his own right, and from the president, that we were in Belgium 2 weeks ago discussing an increase in security after the synagogue had been firebombed in a town in Belgium. And the Belgian government agreed to increase security by bringing the military to protect Jewish institutions. As a result of that action, today when there was an attack on a Jewish institution and Jewish businesses, the military that had just stepped in literally 3 days ago was able to apprehend two of the three perpetrators and find out that they are linked to Iranian terror groups. So These are things that are a result of the president being actively involved and the Secretary of State being actively involved in holding governments accountable for how they are and what they're doing to combat anti-Semitism. The commitment is as clear as day, that this administration will not tolerate people who are anti-Semitic. The president has made it clear that those people who issue anti-Semitic rhetorics, they do not speak for him, they do not speak for his party, and they don't speak for America. And we're better than that as a country. This country was founded on religious freedom, religious liberty, freedom of expression. You can say whatever you want to say, but you have the right, and we have a right to worship freely and be required. The government has to protect you to worship freely in this country. And that's something the president takes very seriously around the globe to hold countries accountable.
You know, it strikes me that there's really two buckets where an administration can fight this. One is rhetorically, and I think President Trump has made quite clear rhetorically he's not going to tolerate any anti-Semitism in his political movement, in the MAGA movement. Even, I think, as you point out, there are people out there who are espousing these views, and they're trying to attach these views to the president or his party or his political movement, and he has flatly stopped them in their tracks. He has told them no. The other bucket, of course, is on the policy side. You're talking a little bit about that, and prioritization of policies. I'm sort of interested in how those conversations go inside the government. You're at the State Department. You know, we've seen over at the Department of Justice under Attorney General Bondi and Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon, there have been a lot of movement there to stop anti-Semitic hate crimes, people who commit violence on these grounds, and they've also taken on these college campuses where the administrators let anti-Semitism flourish and take hold on campuses. Talk to us a little bit about the meetings, the conversations, what goes on inside intra-agency to not just have the rhetoric right, which I think it's dead right, but to also make sure the policies are being prioritized in a way that can be put into action out in the real world.
Well, as you said before, you talk about it, that's an agency-directed effort. It's an interagency as well. It involves all facets of the government, whether it be Department of Justice working, with laws on campuses and how to protect people, their civil rights, as well as on college campuses to protect Jewish students, and enforcing that these colleges have to be held accountable for what they're doing to not keep students safe. The title, all those title cases that exist. Harmeet Dillon, together with Attorney General Pam Bondi and the wonderful staff that's there, those people are rock stars. They really are. They're using creative legal strategies that actually implement and protect not just the Jewish community, but against hate in its entirety. And it's a focus of the Department of Justice and the administration. It's working, for example, together with Department of Justice, with the Department of State, on student visas. That, as the Secretary of State has said numerous times, being in this country, it's a privilege. It's something that you get the right to on a visa. It is not a right. And as a result, if you're coming to this country, instead of being to educate yourself, you're coming to this country to sow discord or to try and inflame the fires of hatred, you do not have a place here. You're not welcome here. The Secretary of State has made that perfectly clear, and he's used all the tools. DHS is involved. All of these groups are involved to make certain that people should be safe in this country and have the ability to worship freely and have the ability to be educated in a manner without hatred. And here's something, for example, where Treasury is involved, that foreign monies that are coming into college campuses now have to disclose which governments are giving them that money, what chairs are being endowed, what it's being used for. These things did not exist. And a year and a half ago, Jewish students were in absolute danger on college campuses. And from day one, the president has made it his mission to make certain that these students can walk across a campus and be safe and secure. And I would add one more very, very interesting point about that, is that these universities have had ample opportunity to try and be part of working to combat hatred. And for those people that say it's a freedom of expression issue and it's not about anti-Semitism, one of the definitions of the IRA anti-Semitism documents is that you're okay to criticize Israel as long as you're consistent in criticizing other countries and other things as well. It can't be just about Israel. And what we're seeing from the college campuses, the fact that there aren't numerous protests about civilians being killed in Iran, brutally murdered by a dictatorship, and yet you don't see those same people who are claiming human rights violations on college campuses protesting, it begs to ask the question, Is this anti-Semitism, or are these people truly caring about human rights?
That voice you're hearing on the Scott Jennings Show today, Ambassador Yehuda Kaploun. He was confirmed by the Senate in December as President Trump's special envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism. He speaks to us from Washington, D.C. today. We have about a minute left, Ambassador. I'm curious. You know, this is a diplomatic position. You're an ambassador. You report into the State Department. I'm kind of curious about what your day-to-day work is like. I know things happen in the moment and you have to deal with it. How much are you in Washington? How much are you traveling? How much are you talking about these issues with your counterparts in other countries? Give us an idea of what someone in your position is doing on a day-to-day basis. I assume every day is a long one.
I will tell you that we'll just give you a little bit of what today has been like. At 7:30 in the morning, we had a conference call with all the ambassadors, special envoys globally to combat anti-Semitism to discuss the growing trends. We had conversations with different ambassadors in countries that have had anti-Semitic attacks after that. We met with a delegation of students from the UK today. We've met with 3 ambassadors who have actively trying to educate their countries to use best practices that we have in our country to go against hate. And that's just where, and then we're doing a radio show with you, so your listeners can hear that we are actively busy. Afterwards, we have 2 more ambassadors coming into the State Department today. We have some dinner meetings with 2 different dinner meetings with groups that are actively working to combat anti-Semitism. The days are full, but the difference is we can see actual results, that we're working every day to make Americans safer globally, to make Jewish Americans feel free wherever they are, that they're going to be protected by their government. And, for example, even today, after the terrible attack in England yesterday, that 4 ambulances were, burned by a group of radical youth, the English government today, at the request of, our ambassador and our team and our secretary, they're replacing them with 4 new ambulances to show that they're trying to be serious about combating hate. They have a long way to go to protect their citizens. The fact that these incidents can occur are problematic. But we're hopeful that people will be educated to be better humans, and all of humanity will be better for it.
That voice is Ambassador Rabbi Yehuda Kaploun. The office in the State Department is called Special Envoy to Monitor and Combat Anti-Semitism. Find him on the X platform at State SEAS, at State SEAS. I encourage you to follow the ambassador and the work of this Office of the Special Envoy. It is quite critical. Ambassador, thanks for joining us. We look forward to having you back. I do need to give our listeners a word from our friends at the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. As we've been discussing on the show over the last several weeks, Operation Epic Fury is causing trouble in Israel, especially for the most vulnerable. They're under constant red alert sirens, missiles are falling, and when you hear these sirens, you have just a few seconds to get into a bomb shelter. And so it's at times like these that charitable organizations like the Fellowship are most in need. They're preparing large-scale distributions of life-saving food, first aid, emergency essentials for security personnel. They help with hospitals and emergency rooms. They are there to protect and help the sick, the elderly, children, families. They all depend on the Fellowship at critical times like these. I'm encouraging you to join Christians and Jews around the world in praying for the protection of Israel, her people, and the brave soldiers from the U.S. and Israel who are putting their lives on the line for the fight for freedom. Stand with Israel in prayer today. Visit supportifcj.org. That is supportifcj.org. More on the Scott Jennings Show after this. Stay with us.
The man who made CNN safe for conservatives again. Here's Scott Jennings.
All right, home stretch on Tuesday, March 24th here on the Scott Jennings Show. A couple of quick notes. It sounds like Senator, now Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen has been sworn in, confirmed last night, sworn in today. He takes over at the Department of Homeland Security. A briefing from NTSB officials today is shedding some light on what happened at LaGuardia Airport, where the plane ran into the fire truck on the runway. 2 pilots killed, I think over 40 other people taken to the hospital with varying degrees of injuries. It sounds like an alert system that should have notified people on the tarmac to prevent something like this didn't work. We're still monitoring that, and I'm sure we'll talk about that on the air a little bit tomorrow. So a couple of issues out there that we're following and we'll follow up on in the days ahead. There's one other story I wanted to bring to you today, a breaking news story that should get every American's attention. Dennis Coyle, an American citizen who was wrongly detained by the Taliban, has been released. Prior to his capture, Dennis spent 2 decades in Afghanistan studying language and culture. He was really deeply connected to the region. He was not a tourist. He certainly wasn't a troublemaker. And yet, in January of 2025, he was taken from his home in Kabul and held by the Taliban without charges. He did not get a trial. He got no due process. He just disappeared. And for over a year, he sat in detention, much of it reportedly in near solitary confinement. And his family back home, they were waiting, they were praying, they were pushing for action. And today their prayers are answered. We're being told that Mr. Coyle has been released. The Taliban claims it is a humanitarian gesture tied to a religious holiday and a court review, but let's not kid ourselves. This didn't happen in a vacuum. The United States, the Trump administration, and Secretary of State Rubio took a very strong stance on this, officially labeling the Taliban government as a state sponsor of wrongful detention. They made it clear there would be consequences if Americans were continued to be held. Secretary Rubio got involved. That's the key point here. This is a huge victory for Secretary Rubio in his diplomatic efforts. And it shows something that's true. Strength matters. And for too long, hostile regimes like the Taliban have operated under the assumption that detaining Americans would give them some kind of leverage, that they could use innocent people as bargaining chips. Those days are over. This administration, the Trump administration, with Secretary Rubio in charge of state, they have said, we will not tolerate hostage diplomacy, and now they're backing it up with action. That's what we're seeing here, getting Mr. Coyle released by the Taliban. The only thing that changes this sort of despicable behavior, in my opinion, is real pressure and real strength, and that's what you got out of the Trump administration. This is the kind of pressure, the kind of action that makes it clear there's a cost for bad behavior, and that consequences for bad actors results in good news for the American people. The Trump administration has prioritized bringing home American citizens being held hostage. That is the story today. Dennis Coyle is going home. His family gets him back, and it is truly a wonderful day. Oh, I should add, the story isn't over. He's not the only American who is being wrongfully held. There are others who are still detained or missing in Afghanistan. It's part of a broader pattern around the world, Americans being wrongfully detained by hostile regimes. They're all looking for leverage. But when the United States projects strength, when it draws clear lines and backs them up, we will get results. Safety and peace for Americans doesn't come from hoping for goodwill. It comes from strength, clear, consistent, and unmistakable strength. That's what we're projecting. So we have one American, Dennis Coyle, coming home today, and now the job continues to make sure that every American in similar circumstances also comes home. Before we go today, I do want to thank you for listening. And if you like what we're doing here, if you like the news, you like the comment, you like the analysis, if you like Mike Gallagher, the legend of Salem, if you like Larry O'Connor of Town Hall, if you like me, you're going to find all three of us together on a cruise ship this November, and we would love to invite you to be a part of it. It's mid-November. It's called the Gulf of America Cruise. We're going to go celebrate our country's 250th anniversary. We're going to have conversation about politics and policy. We're going to go to some amazing locations. The ship is called the Eurodam. It's a luxury ship. I mean, one of the best. We want you to join us and be part of this whole program. It's really incredible. Book your cabin today. Text the word cruise to 94878. Text the word cruise to 94878. We'll be back tomorrow with more news, comment, and analysis. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. Thank you for listening.